Carl Jung's final message about empaths will shatter everything you believe about your compassion. What many call empathy often begins as something far darker. Childhood survival. The empath, Jung discovered, is just the child who was never allowed to be selfish, forced to erase their needs, scan every mood in the room, and keep others stable just to stay safe. That hypervigilance became their identity, and now it's quietly killing them. Jung saw this pattern repeatedly. Adults who called themselves deeply caring weren't simply born that way. They were wired in crisis. As children, they lived in emotional minefields, unstable moods, unpredictable outbursts, silent tension thick as glass. To survive, they became watchtowers. They scanned every microexpression, every tone shift, every flicker of disappointment, and adapted instantly to neutralize it. Here's the hidden cost. This premature adaptation forces the child to build a false miniature ego long before their real one has formed. Instead of growing from the inside out, they grow around others. Their inner voice becomes a surveillance system, not a compass. Jung warned this creates a catastrophic message that seeps into the unconscious. My needs are dangerous. That belief doesn't vanish in adulthood. It becomes your default operating system. You flinch at your own desires. You apologize for existing. You can comfort anyone but can't name what you want. This is not empathy, it's self-erasure. And it comes with a hidden shadow. Everything that was forbidden, anger, no, boundaries, self-prioritization, gets buried in the psyche like contraband. Jung saw how these forbidden selfish impulses don't disappear. They rot. They leak out sideways as guilt, resentment, or compulsive people-pleasing that never satisfies. You keep giving, but something in you grows quietly bitter that no one gives back. Worse, your nervous system confuses suppression for love. The more invisible you become, the safer you feel. You become fluent in everyone else's feelings while emotionally illiterate about your own. You smile while starving. You soothe while silently splintering. And people respond to this performance. They reward it. They call you strong, selfless, kind. So you keep doing it, and the cost compounds. The child who once erased themselves to survive has now become the adult who cannot stop disappearing. This is the paradox Jung saw most clearly. Your so-called empathy was never freedom. It was a leash, a role you were forced to master before you even had a self. The part of you that could have explored, demanded, rebelled, claimed joy, was buried alive under duty. And while the world praises you for being endlessly understanding, your own psyche quietly counts the years you were not allowed to exist. This is where the trap cements. Because that bitterness never reaches the surface, it becomes invisible even to you. But others feel it, and unconsciously they start expecting you to be the one who bends, absorbs, rescues. Your entire identity orbits around being safe, useful, selfless, and slowly you vanish. Stay with this, because soon we'll enter what Jung called the wounded healer paradox. The moment your psyche starts revolting against this survival pattern, triggering resentment, burnout, and even sudden emotional shutdowns, what feels like you breaking is actually the first crack in the false self. Jung called it the wounded healer paradox, and it's the hidden engine driving most empaths straight toward collapse. Here's how it unfolds. You spend years pouring energy into everyone else, believing it's love. But because you buried your own needs so young, you don't notice the truth. You're giving from emptiness. You look generous, but underneath, you're starving. And your psyche knows it. Jung saw that when someone gives while secretly empty, their unconscious triggers compensation, an ancient psychic defense that forces the psyche to balance itself. You can't keep leaking life force forever, so the unconscious flips the polarity. The very traits you've repressed, boundaries, anger, self-prioritization, surge back from the shadow with feral force. This reversal has a name, enantiodromia. Jung used it to describe the psyche's tendency to swing to the opposite extreme when an imbalance becomes unbearable. The empath who never says no suddenly isolates. The caretaker who lived for others vanishes for months. The selfless one becomes ruthlessly self-protective overnight. It looks like you're breaking. You're not. This is your psyche revolting against its own captivity, and it's messy. Jung warned that when the false, people-pleasing self starts to crack, it doesn't dissolve gently. It shatters. All the grief, rage, and longing you locked away in childhood floods the surface at once. You feel volatile, alien, even monstrous. That's because your real self, buried for decades, is finally forcing its way back into the light. Most people panic here. They mistake this eruption for failure. They think they've lost their compassion, when in truth, they're tasting it for the first time, compassion that includes themselves. But this is also the most dangerous moment, because without guidance, the swing can overshoot. Jung saw burned-out empaths fall into cold detachment, cutting off everyone and calling it healing. It's not. It's just the pendulum mid-swing. The danger here is building a new false self, this time armored instead of invisible. You'll be tempted to call this freedom. It's not. it's backlash. Here's what Jung stressed. The goal is not to swing from martyrdom to isolation. It's to hold both poles at once, to build what he called the transcendent function, the ability to carry two opposites without collapsing into either. Because only from that tension can something new be born, not the overgiving self, not the walled-off self, but a third thing entirely. A self who can care without disappearing. Stay with this, because next we'll enter that tension point. The psychic crossroads where individuation begins, where you stop performing empathy and start building sacred selfishness. Jung said individuation begins the moment the psyche refuses to keep swinging between extremes. When it stops choosing sides between self-sacrifice and self-protection and starts building something larger that can hold both. He called this the transcendent function, the internal bridge that unites opposites without erasing either. For the empath, this is the first time the nervous system learns a new law. Your needs are not a threat to love. Up to now, your whole identity has been built on a false binary, that you can either care for others or care for yourself, never both. So you kept choosing others, trying to earn safety through self-erasure. But individuation demands you stop playing that rigged game. This is where sacred selfishness begins. It's not arrogance, it's not cruelty. It's the radical act of granting your own life equal weight to everyone else's, something the old survival self never allowed. Jung saw that healthy development requires what he called a dose of necessary narcissism. Not vanity, but basic self-regard. The capacity to say, I matter, without apology. For the empath, this feels heretical at first. You've been taught your worth lies in selflessness. So when you try to set a boundary, your body floods with guilt, as if you've committed a betrayal. But that guilt is just the ghost of the old contract. The one that said, your safety depends on never having edges. It's not truth, it's conditioning. As you hold the tension between giving and protecting, the psyche begins to rewire. You stop absorbing emotions as commands. You stop translating other people's moods as warnings. You begin to sense where you end and others begin. And for the first time, your empathy becomes a choice, not a reflex. This is emotional sovereignty, the foundation of sacred selfishness. You can witness someone's pain without fusing with it. You can say that hurts them without silently adding, so it's my job to fix it. Jung saw this shift as a kind of psychic rebirth. The child who once existed as a barometer for everyone else's chaos becomes an autonomous center. And something deeper happens here. The old self begins to grieve. It grieves the years spent performing love to feel safe. It grieves the friendships built on silence, the relationships maintained by self-erasure, the life that never had room for you. Jung wrote that individuation always comes with mourning, because the false self dies screaming and the real one rises quietly. But individuation doesn't stop at reclaiming space. It demands you occupy it. That means naming your needs without shrinking and holding them as non-negotiable, even if it disappoints people who are trained to expect your silence. This is the crucible. The moment boundaries rise, old relationships fracture, roles collapse. The ones who depended on you staying small will push back hard. They will call you selfish, cold, unrecognizable. That is not failure. That is proof the false self is dying. When you first reclaim your boundaries, it feels like betrayal. The people who benefited from your silence will treat your no like an act of war. This is where most empaths relapse. They confuse the discomfort of becoming real with proof they're becoming cruel. Jung saw this fear as the final defense of the false self, the part of you still clinging to the old rule. If I'm not soft, I'll be unloved. But here's the truth. Your softness was never the reason they stayed. It was the convenience of your self-erasure. As your boundaries rise, something fascinating happens. Your nervous system recalibrates. You stop scanning rooms like a radar dish. You stop anticipating everyone's needs before they speak. Instead, you start listening inward. This shift terrifies people who are used to your emotional labor. But for the first time, you feel rooted. And this is where it gets powerful. Once your boundaries harden, your empathy becomes voluntary. It turns from compulsion into choice. You can turn it on without drowning and off without guilt. This is what Jung meant when he said the goal of individuation is not harmony, but wholeness. Because from wholeness, you can care without collapse. Most people never get here. They either stay stuck in martyrdom or swing into cold withdrawal. You're doing something rarer, building reciprocity as your baseline. Every relationship must now stand on balance or not at all. That requirement alone reshapes your entire world. Some connections will fade instantly, others will rise to meet you. Watch who adjusts when you stop shrinking. It will tell you exactly who is relating to you and who is feeding from you. And here's the paradox. Your relationships get fewer, but infinitely more real. Instead of intensity, you start craving clarity. Instead of drama, you start choosing depth. This is where your discernment sharpens. You start seeing how often you mistook chaos for connection, neediness for love, urgency for intimacy. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Something else happens here that few talk about. Your body starts trusting you. The constant tension in your chest, the micro freezes in your nervous system, the reflexive guilt for resting, they begin to dissolve because your body no longer expects you to abandon it for someone else's comfort. This is what real safety feels like, and it's unsettling only because you've never known it before. Pause and notice this. The people who truly value you won't be threatened by your boundaries. They'll relax around them because to the right people, your clarity is safety, not rejection. The ones who vanished were never with you. They were with the role you performed. Let them go. And this is crucial. If you stop here, you'll plateau. Boundaries alone are protection, not freedom. Freedom requires the next step, relational recalibration, shifting your identity from caretaker to sovereign participant. Not every empath makes it this far. Most stop at survival, but if you cross this threshold, the entire gravitational field of your relationships will change. Chaos will stop finding you. What comes next is where you stop orbiting others and start becoming your own center. This is where everything tilts. Once your boundaries hold, your old relational ecosystem begins to collapse. The people who thrived on your self-erasure won't just fade. They'll resist, bargain, escalate. Jung warned this isn't failure, it's gravity resetting. Because when you stop playing caretaker, every relationship built on that role has to transform or end. You'll see it clearly. Some interpret your boundaries as betrayal. Others see them as permission to be real too. That split is your compass. It shows who is bonded to your mask and who can meet your real self. And something startling happens. The chaos stops finding you. The energy parasites, emotional whirlwinds, endless crises disappear because you've stopped broadcasting the silent signal. I will carry you. But this shift brings grief. You'll feel the weight of all the years you performed stability for others while never having it yourself. That grief isn't weakness. It's your nervous system updating to the truth. Here's the trap. Many people panic here. They rush back to old roles just to feel anchored. Don't. This void is the bridge. Cross it, and your relationships will no longer be built on need, only on recognition. This is the key. Empathy stops being a survival reflex and becomes a choice. You can care without carrying, connect without merging, love without disappearing. This is sacred selfishness, showing up whole, giving only from overflow, never from deficit. And when you embody this, relationships stop feeling like rescues. They become mirrors, equal, real. This is the point where people say you've changed. They're right. Your light is no longer for sale. This is the stage most empaths never reach. Not because it's unreachable, but because it feels unnatural at first, living without guilt. By now, your nervous system has recalibrated. You're no longer scanning every room for danger. You're scanning for alignment. Chaos no longer hooks you. Urgency no longer excites you. Neediness no longer flatters you. Because your sense of worth is no longer rented from other people's dependence. It's rooted in your own presence. This is what Jung pointed to as Individuation's endgame, becoming a whole psychological system unto yourself. Your selfhood no longer flexes to fit the room. It stays intact, and the room adapts around you. Empathy is now choiceful. You turn it on deliberately, like light, not as a reflex. You can stand inside someone's storm without absorbing it. You can care without carrying. You can leave without guilt. And here's the paradox. Your compassion gets sharper, not weaker. Because it's clean now. No hidden agenda, no desperation to be needed. You give only when you mean it. You walk when it's no longer mutual. You don't confuse intensity for intimacy or drama for depth. Relationships transform. Reciprocity becomes your baseline. The takers fall away. The equals remain. Your life gets quieter and infinitely more honest. And something profound locks in. You stop trying to be understood. You become uninterested in proving your goodness. You don't need to be seen as kind. You just are, on your terms. This is the integrated empath. Soft but not porous, compassionate but not consumed, available but never at the cost of yourself. And this is the moment you realize what you once called empathy was just survival. Now, it's freedom.